Everything you need to know about basic Blender rendering in one video. What's up? I'm Jonathan and welcome to Maker Tales, where I'm sharing my maker journey to help you go further in yours. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell icon to never miss an opportunity to keep making. This video is all about covering Blender's rendering basics to get results like these by the end of the video. Now, we will be going a little bit over EEvee, a little bit over Cycels, and if you have no idea of what I've just said right there, you're in the right place. I myself, I'm sure you've seen from my thumbnails, have been playing around with it, and all of these here have been created in Render using these very simple ways of rendering that I'm going to show you right now. So to start off with, let's create a simple scene so we have a playground to play around with rendering. So this is going to be a very simple plane with 3 cubes on it. Now, if you don't know what I'm doing here, I do have an entire Blender Precision series that teaches you absolutely everything I'm doing here from the ground up. So I'm just going to go here, let's go here, bring that down to there, and now I'm just going to go and grab this, Shift D, let's move this on the Y 3mm, on the X 3mm, and do the same with this one but in the other direction. So GY minus 3 and GX minus 3. So there we go, a nice simple scene. We'll be able to improve a little bit more later on when we go and get a little bit more complicated. And there we have it, a nice simple scene. Now, if you've gone through my Blender Precision series, you have a little bit of understanding of materials, but materials is fundamentally how you get to color and texture things within Blender. The materials is this little beach ball looking thing here. So let's go ahead and select this bottom plane and let's hit this beach ball, and you'll see that there are no materials in here. So let's go ahead and create a new material for this plane. So let's go there. Let's go ahead and type in here and type this into floor. So now we know that this is the floor material. Now, in the how to stay organized in Blender video, I was only using here viewport display color, which would change the color here in the viewport. Now, I'm going to be showing you a couple of different views this time around. So we're not going to change the viewport color. However, it still can be very useful when you're doing rough out modeling. But what we'll actually be using is the surface itself. Now, if we went ahead and changed this now to a very nice dark color, we don't see a difference. The reason why is because we have to go into this viewport setting here. Now this one here is the material preview, and the next one is the rendering preview. Now to start off with, let's just go into the material preview, and you'll see here that our plane is now dark. So let's go ahead, let's make it just a little bit darker, and let's go ahead and do the same for the cubes, giving them different colors. So let's go ahead, let's select this middle one, and you'll see that it already has a material on it this time round. The reason why is that cubes, so 3D objects, usually come in with a default material. So let's go ahead and we're going to use this same material but changing the color. To recreate the same material, use this little plus copy material button, so to speak. So let's copy that one. I'm going to call this red cube. And oops, I've called this recube, red cube. There we go. And let's go ahead and just change the material up. All right, fantastic. So that one's a red one. Go ahead and do the same for the other two. I'll be doing this one here. I'm going to change this one to green. And then let's do this one last time for this one over here, which will be blue. Now, I'm sure most of you are thinking right this minute, so what happens if you have an object that you're wanting more than one color on? So just to go over that, what we'll do is we're actually going to go ahead and edit this shape. And as you see, we can still do edits within Material Preview. And let's go into Face Select. Let's select this face. Let's inset it a little bit. And let's go ahead and about there, I would say, and then let's extrude this inwards by 1.8. Let's say that 1.8 this way around. Fantastic. So let's say that face in here, or let's say that these faces around in here, you wanted these to be a different color. Well, to do that, one object can have more than one material. Now to do this, you go ahead and hit the plus button. This gives you another material, and because these faces are selected, you can then assign them to that material. So let's assign that. You will see that they are no longer red. So if I deselect, they're no longer red. They're now this material here, but this material has still not been defined. So let's click on new material, and let's make this, I don't know, let's say an orange. Let's make this an orange color right around there. So right there, we now have two colors on one material. Now, of course, this viewport looks slightly off, and the main reason why is because we still don't have shadows or lighting. So let's go ahead and go into the next viewport, which is the rendering or shading. So let's go here, and you'll see that it's very dark. Now, the big obvious reason why is that I currently don't have any lights. Now, if you have this absolutely as default, you do come with a light, so it's up to you if you want to use that one or delete it and follow me on this. I'm going to be adding a light, and I'm going to be using a sun. You can play around with all the other ones, but I usually use a sun for mine. So with this sun now in place, this just means that it has a consistent power anywhere it goes, and it's just the angle that you change. So I'm just going to move this upwards here to make it a little bit easier to see. I'm going to go into the 3D mouse as my little orientation point, and now I'm going to do a rotation on the Y by 45 degrees. Fantastic. And then I'm going to do another rotation on the X by 45 degrees, and I'm going to say in the other direction, please. So I'm going to hit minus to go this direction. Fantastic. So as you can see, we now have some lighting, some shading, and you're starting to get a little bit more of a representation of what's going to be happening here in the render. Now, just quickly, I want you to note that if we go back into the material preview, you're not going to be seeing much lighting change here. The main reason why is you have to go into this little drop down of the shading, and here you can put in scene lights and scene world, and that there lets you have material shading itself. However, it's completely up to you how you have this. I'm going to leave this as default, as I usually do, and then I'm going to use rendering to do all my lighting setup. Now, speaking of rendering, I'm sure there's one key thing that we're needing that we don't have left on this scene, which is a camera. Now, if you have the complete default setup, you will have a camera. However, I don't have a camera, so I'm going to go ahead and let's create a camera. So by clicking a camera and hitting 0 on the numpad, you might have to emulate numpad. So what I'm going to do here to move my camera is I'm going to go to View, lock camera to View, and then I'm going to be able to scroll out to be able to move my camera out. Now, a quick note on cameras. So cameras in Blender come in two sort of styles of tastes, which is the perspective and orthographic. So the main difference is the perspective camera is very much like a real camera. It has a focal length. So as you can see, we can increase this focal length. You can also play around with depth of field, but I'm not going to go into that for now. And you can also change this into orthographic. Now, orthographic, you change this through the orthographic scale. Now, all of my thumbnails are pretty much orthographic. So I'm going to go and change this to orthographic there. I'm going to lock my camera view once again, move my camera so it's somewhere where I'm happy with the outcome. I'm going to say, I don't know, maybe something around like that looks pretty to me. And that there is cameras. Now let's go into something that you might have heard of, which is EEvee and Cycels. EEvee and Cycels are two different types of rendering engines or methods of rendering. Right this minute, what you're seeing here is EEvee, which is Blender's 2.8 new rendering engine, which is incredible for a very fast workflow. So right this minute, if we were to hit render, Up here on the top left hand side, you will have render image. You can actually render what your camera is seeing, and there you have it. That is EEvee out of the box. Now, of course, there are many settings, and you can go over here to the little camera, which is the rendering properties. And with rendering properties, you can go ahead and add some screen surface reflections. You can add bloom. You can add whatever you want, really. But you will see that it isn't quite realistic in the sense of how light is bouncing around. It has no ambient occlusion, has no real true reflections, the way that it's truly calculated through the bouncing of rays. Now, to do that, you need to go into Cycels. Now, the main way to use Cycels is to change this to a GPU compute if you have a powerful GPU, and you'll see straight away the difference. So I'm going to move this to EEvee. You see how that comes out there, and this is Cycels. Now I'm going to do a quick render right this minute so you can see how it comes out. So as you can see, it is very different to EEvee. Now I personally, what I do is I usually do about 80% of my scene setup with EEvee, and then I do my final render tests all in Cycels, and my final render in Cycels itself. But fundamentally, the main difference is that Cycels has a high quality reflections and shadows and so on. EEvee definitely does have its place when you need some very quick renders, and it really can do the job sometimes. Let me show you a little bit more with the materials. Now we have our red cube here, which has this little extrusion inwards. Now the reason why I've done this is because what I want to do is if we go here inside and go into edit mode and select this face here, I'm actually going to assign this yet another material. Now, when we assign this new material, I want to show you that there are many materials. When we're keeping things simple, you can get a lot more complicated with materials, but still staying simple. Here on the surfaces, right this minute, it's the basic surface. But there's all these other ones here. Now, one of the ones that's quite powerful is emission. So you can turn a surface into a light source. So let's go ahead, hit that as emission, and now if we go out of edit mode and make sure we assign that face to the emission material, my bad. Let's also just quickly rename this to emission, remission, and go out of edit mode, go into camera view, and you can see already there's that emission outwards. So let's go ahead, let's just turn that strength up, I don't know, maybe 2. So it's 2 times more powerful, so we get more of a reflection here. And let's go ahead and play around with a few extra little settings. Now these settings I almost always play around with. So within rendering, there is color management. And in color management, I usually set the exposure to 2, so everything's just a little bit brighter. And then here on the look, you can go ahead and add some contrast. You can go with just a medium amount of contrast, or you can go with very high contrast. So let's just go with high contrast for now. And let's go ahead and let me show you one other thing, which is to do with materials. So if we select this, which is our plane, our floor, and we go into our material settings, now you'll really start to see the material come to life as there's multiple light sources as well as colors and all this. Especially within Cycels, you will see this happen. So if we were to here change the specularity, let's turn this all the way down, you can see that the floor is basically matte. This is now a matte surface. However, if you were to turn up the specularity now and go really high up, you can see that it has lots of speckles, shiny surfaces. Now it's not reflective, completely reflective, because the specularity is the specularity of it. If you're talking about the reflection amount, that's to do with the roughness. So if you think about this, a really rough surface is a matte surface. So you can go really rough, and you can see that it still has specularity, but it's almost matte. But if we were to go ahead and turn down this roughness all the way, you can see this is practically a mirror. Now, of course, you can change around with lots of things here. So you can make this a very slightly specular mirror. So as you can see, it turns into this very dark, shiny surface. But here's the main ways to play around with things, is right here by changing these settings all along here. I really encourage you to play around because that is the best way to learn. Now, additionally, I want you to see this metallic property. The metallic property is truly an on and off switch, really, because as soon as you start becoming metallic, you will see that all of the ones in the bottom here will start to act slightly differently. So if I were to go all the way metallic, you can see how everything changes. But the biggest change you'll see is with color. So if I were to change this to almost a white, and I'm really metallic here, you can see how it's gone gray. However, if I were to put down this metallicness, it goes back to being white. So this changes many things. So just keep that in mind when you're playing around with metallic objects. So here, let's go to something around there. And lastly, let's go ahead and just touch on one thing of lighting and then the final render settings. So within lighting, we can go to our sun and we can actually make this brighter, sharper, and change how shadows are done. So you can see right this minute, our shadow is extremely sharp. This is due to our angle of our light here. Now, it's not the angle that the light is coming from, but it's the shutter angle, so to speak. So if we were to increase this, you will see that our shadows are almost non-existent. However, if we were to have this to 0, they are very harsh shadows. So let's change this to something along the lines of 22. And you'll see that our shadows are now feathered. Now let's say we wanted our light to just be a tiny little bit brighter, so let's go ahead and use nodes. I don't really like to play around with the strength up here. I prefer to use the nodes when it comes into Cycels. So I'm going to use this, I'm going to turn this up to 1.5. Just give it that extra little punch of power. And this right there is starting to look like a decent render and color for me. Now into the last of the render settings. So let's just quickly look at the render properties here. So this here, which is the sampling, you can see all these little dots. The sampling is how many times will it shoot a light and follow where it's bouncing around to do its calculation of lights and reflections and all the rest. So that's where this here is going to go in effect. This can increase your rendering time dramatically if you increase this too high. I haven't changed this at all for any of my rendering. However, I will show you a little caveat that comes from not increasing this and how to solve it. Now lastly, let's look at the output of the render itself. So if we go here to the output properties, you can see many things. You can see our resolution size. So this here can be the resolution that you're wanting it to be. You could make this for an Instagram post or anything else that you're wanting to do. Just be aware that the higher this is, the longer it will take to render. So let's go ahead and I'll do a quick render here and I'll show you what I've created. So this here is how our render is currently coming out. Now what I'm seeing here is that I actually want the floor just a tiny bit darker. So I'm just going to go ahead, select the floor here, go into the material settings, and let's go ahead and just make that just a touch darker so there's more of a contrast within the image. Actually, that's almost all the way down. Actually, we can go all the way down almost. Let's go about there. I'm going to re-render this and then we're going to go into the caveat that I was talking about. So with our scene now rendered, you can see our outcome here and you can see the dither that's going on here. You can see there's quite a bit of noise. In the shadow there's some noise. There's just sort of noise everywhere. Now if you don't know what noise is, it's basically where the calculation doesn't really have enough information to truly understand what's going on there. But that's because we wanted a fast render. Now I will be showing you how to denoise this, and this is the caveat of using a lower sampling rate. So the lower this rate, the noisier the image is going to be. Now, just before we carry on, I do want to point one thing out to you, that you know that right this minute in this scene, we have one sunlight coming in this direction. And you would probably expect these areas to actually be much darker than they currently are. Now, the reason for this is that if we go here into our world properties and you go to surface, this here is like the background color. You can sort of see this as. It really isn't. It's not ambient light, so to speak. It's not ambient occlusion, which is a completely different thing, but it's to do with the overall color that's being sort of casted in the world. For instance, if we were to turn off this light, you can see it's not completely black. And that reason why is this right here. So I'm going to turn the sun back on. I'm going to increase the strength of this, and you see that this increases the strength. It just brightens up the whole scene. If I were to turn this to 0, our only light source is coming from our sun. So if you're wanting pure control of your lights, make sure you turn this off so you can have that. So you can turn this to 1. You can also change the color of it here. So if you're wanting to get some sort of stylized semi-blue look like that, you can go and do that right there. So I'm going to render this out, and then I'm going to show you how to denoise this image. So this here is our final result. As you can see, there's a little bit of noise down here. Now, it doesn't really bother me, but I would like to be able to just show you how to get rid of it. Now, of course, what I'm going to be showing you could be seen as dated now, as there is now the Optix Denoising, but I don't have a powerful enough GPU, and also I just want to make this as open as possible to show you how to take it raw denoising yourself. Now, if you want to know more about denoising, I have useful links down in the description for it. So let's go ahead and get this denoised. So the first thing is I'm going to go into my rendering layers. So this one here, my view layered properties, and I'm going to add denoising data. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because this will let me have more information to work with when we go into compositing. Now, don't let that scare you, because it's going to be very simple inside of compositing. But before we go into there, you just need to quickly do one more render of the scene as it is so that it captures this denoising data. So let's go ahead and render that out. So with this re-rendered out, let's go ahead and close it, and let's go into our compositing. Now here in compositing, it's very simple what we will be doing. We're going to click this here for use nodes, which gives us this. Now don't be frightened by this. We're going to keep this very simple. It's sort of the same controls. Let's go Shift A. We're going to do a search for denoise. Fantastic. And then we're also going to do one more search for a viewer. So fantastic, viewer. Now we're just going to drag and drop this image to image. Fantastic. Now we're going to go noisy image is our image, and you will see now our background changes to our render. Now all that's left is our denoising normal is going to go to the denoise normal, and our denoise albedo will be going to our denoise albedo. And it's as easy as that. Now, if you're looking to do more than just exporting one thing, you're going to have to look up more videos, because I just know how to export one image right this minute. So I'm going to click this viewer, and then I'm going to go into the item properties, and then with the item properties of the viewer selected, you can go ahead and save an image. Select where you want to save it, and I'm going to save it right to my desktop. And that easily is how you go about rendering within Blender. Now, of course, this isn't exactly realistic. Now, I will be doing another video to show you semi-realistic. I'm not going for hyper-realism, because that you can go years into development to really understand how to do that in Blender, but I will be showing you how to do more realistic textures in a future video. And there you have it. It's that easy to get up and running with a Blender rendering. And I do mean it, that absolutely every one of my thumbnails up to this point has been done using just what I've shown you there, if not even less so. A huge thank you to my patrons. You guys are absolutely awesome, and I appreciate it so much. And if you think I'm worthy of your support, I would love to see you there too. Thank you for watching. Keep making and let the quest continue.